Hello, my name is Adeline Anderson, and today I will be talking about the Red Baron. Manfred von Richthofen is his real name, but he was commonly referred to as the Red Baron. He's known for flying bright red planes and as a pilot who amassed 80 victories during his short time as a pilot during World War I. He was respected by both his allies and his foes during this time as well. So, I'm just going to sort of talk about how his life began, his early childhood, and his family life. Then I'll move on to his Air Force, his time in the war, and the history of planes he flew. We'll talk about his very first command over a squadron, which was nicknamed the Flying Circus. The German government liked to use him for their propaganda pieces, so we'll touch on that. And during a time where he was injured, he wrote an autobiography. And then, unfortunately, he did have a very early death in his life, which we will end off with. Manfred von Richthofen was born May 2nd, 1892, to a noble aristocratic Prussian family. This is where he gained his title Baron from his family, so sometimes he would go by Baron von Richthofen, or more commonly, Red Baron. He had three siblings, one of which was younger than him, and eventually they would fly alongside each other. As a child, he enjoyed activities that were full of risk and possible danger, such as horseback riding, hunting, and gymnastics. His father put him in military training at the age of 11. Richthofen states that he was not really a fan of it, only getting what was needed done in order to pass. He thought it was really boring, and he just didn't like it. He completed this cadet training in 1911 and then joined the cavalry unit right at the height of trench warfare. His cadet training was the beginning of what would lead to a life of fighting in the war. He joined the war as a cavalry messenger, traveling across the front lines of the trenches. So he was going back and forth to deliver messages in a very, very, very dangerous area. Because of these daring feats, he was awarded the Iron Cross, which was a very nice award in the German army. However, because trench warfare tended to create stalemates in the war, Richthofen grew bored and he put in a transfer to the Air Force in hopes of gaining some more excitement in his life. He began his journey in the sky as an observer. He found it a lot more difficult than he originally assumed. He talks about the extreme discomfort he felt physically while flying. Later on, he moved up as a pilot, and there still wasn't much hope for him. He crashed the very first time he had controls to himself. Determined to keep going, he quickly improved and soon gained the attention of the famous ace fighter pilot at the time, Oswald Boelcke. He was recruited to his squadron, Kampfgeschwader, in March of 1916. Richthofen obtained his first unofficial victory the following month, and then of September the same year he obtained his first real confirmed victory. This started his Silver Cup trend. Every time he would score a victory, he would get a cup engraved with the date and the type of plane he shot down. He collected about 60 of these cups before he had to stop because of the silver shortage, and he was unable to commission them anymore. And then later on, when he was fighting with a different squadron, Jasta II, he witnessed Oswald's death in a collision. Going on from here, Richthofen was only more determined to be a successful fighter pilot. He scored a major victory later on against British ace major Leno Hawker, who was considered one of the best at the time, aside from Boelcke. So, Richthofen flew many planes during his lifetime, but the one that he painted red and earned him the title of Red Baron was his Albatross D3. He painted it red to celebrate gaining command of his first squadron, and it would later be called the Flying Circus. Shortly after, the wing got damaged and it had to be grounded for a little bit. During this time, he switched between other planes that he had previously flown. Despite flying albatrosses for most of his life, he is most commonly depicted with the Fokker DR-1 triplane. It is called a triplane because it had 3 wings. It was popular to depict him flying this plane because it was sort of a new technology at the time. And so he was very commonly associated with this plane, despite not flying it that often. So in 1917, Richthofen gains command of his very own squadron called Jasta 11. It was filled with elite pilots at the time, including his very own brother, which the image of began to please the German government greatly. They all painted their planes bright colors to follow suit of the Red Baron's habit of painting his plane red. This earned them the title of the Flying Circus. The squadron was extremely successful in terms of victory for the German army, and in April 1917, that was hands down the most successful. They totaled about 89 victories, with Richthofen getting 22 just by himself. However, the Flying Circus would be where Richthofen would experience his first batch of bad luck. His head was grazed by a bullet while flying and fighting against the Royal Air Force. While he was not killed, he does recall experiencing temporary blindness and paralysis, but was fortunate enough to regain the ability to land in friendly German territory. As mentioned before, the Red Baron was known for his amazing skill, but he gained his name through his planes. He painted his planes red, which in turn made him stand out. It didn't matter if his opponent saw him coming, because chances are he was still going to win. It became increasingly popular for the German government to depict this in their propaganda, to raise hope for the war. They had this amazing fighter pilot, and no one could stop him. When Richthofen's brother began to fight alongside him, this was another popular image. They were the epitome of a family coming together to take down a shared evil, and together they could win the war, is what Germany wanted to communicate. So, I mentioned earlier that Richthofen wrote an autobiography, Der Rotkampfflieger, which translates to the Red Fighter Pilot. So, when he was grazed by that bullet, he was grounded for about a month. During this time, he wrote an autobiography, which I just told you. It was written in German and published across the country. After most of the fighting in the war stopped, it was translated into English, and excerpts began to spread to popular magazines and newspapers across Europe. Within his book, he begins in his childhood and goes through his life up until that time. He talks about how it was difficult for him to find cadet school enjoyable, since it lacked the risk and danger that he craved. This danger he would later find in planes. He talked about how amazing it felt to be in the air, and that it was a relaxing but powerful experience for him. This feeling would prove very useful for him and his journey, as he later becomes one of the best fighter pilots the world has ever seen. Unfortunately, Richthofen's life was cut short. He was killed April 21st, 1918. He and his circus were pursuing British planes. They were flying at a low altitude, so he was spotted by Australian foot soldiers who also began to shoot at his plane. Along with the shots being fired from the ground, both the British Air Force and the Canadian planes that he was trying to fight against, one of these bullets hit Richthofen in the chest and he was dead within a minute. He crashed his plane into British territory, and his body was taken into their custody. Despite being a hated foe, he was still given a full military burial, and troops came to pay their respects because they said, even though he was their enemy, they were honored to fight against him because of how just the sheer skill that he had. After his death, he was still remembered for years and is still an astonishing pilot with amazing skill that seems almost incomprehensible. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.